Hello, I'm Kristen and this is Kristen Craves Books. So here I am with my March wrap up, and I keep saying this, but I can't believe I'm doing my third wrap up on this channel already. And my time's just going by so fast. I'm just loving every second of being on BookTube, and I thank you all for all your support. And every month I share my stats here. There's no secret that I love the Storygraph. I use both it and Goodreads, but I'm moving more on the Storygraph. I tend to rely on them more often, which is great because it's a smaller company and I follow the owner on Instagram. I just love everything they're doing over there. But anyways, the best part of it is they give you content warnings for all the books, and a lot of the ones I read this month do have content warnings. So I'm going to leave a link to the Storygraph pages for these down below so you can check them out. And if you look along the left side of the page, I believe you can see the content warnings there. And then they also give you stats. So in March, I actually read more than 12 books, but I say 12 books because if you watch my previous video, I talked about 4 baseball books I read, but I don't think everybody's interested in that, so I just didn't include them in here. So I'm just going to say I read 12 books for a total of 4,277 pages, which is great. My reading has been pretty steady this year, so I'm happy about that. And then if you look at the chart here, I really like this mood graph that they do because I am a mood reader, so I find this helpful. I feel like every month the same moods tend to appear, so it's always reflective, dark, tense, mysterious. And this month, the big portion of this pie chart is emotional, which I was actually surprised about, but if I'm looking at the stack I have here, it was emotional. So maybe in April I need to read some more lighthearted books, and I do have a few in mind. And then, no surprise, I've only read a couple lighthearted books. That's pretty normal. And I'm actually read a funny book, which I will get into. It was hilarious. Funny books are hit and miss for me, but when I find a good one, this is a good one. And then pace, I like the pace graph. It's pretty consistent usually, but this month I did read a lot of slow books, but they didn't feel slow to me, and I do like a slower paced novel now and then. It's actually preferred over fast paced sometimes because I just feel like I get more immersed in it that way. So I thought that was interesting. And then page numbers, I said I always want to read at least one book a month that's over 500 pages, but I failed to do that this month. That said, I am about 70% into Jade City, and I'm thinking I'm going to finish it today. Today is April 1st, or tomorrow. So kind of started in March, but it's leading into April, but that's okay. It'll be my 500-page book for April, which is kind of cheating. But then we have the fiction and nonfiction chart. I only read one nonfiction in March. I try to read at least 2, but just didn't get to 2 this year. But the one I did read, I really loved. Then I read a lot of young adult in March, which looking at my stack, I really did. But there's some great YA out there that I've been finding lately, and I've just been loving it. So that's not a surprise, especially in the fantasy genre. And then I read 4 fantasies, which is pretty consistent this year, but it was really a new thing for me. It was never into fantasy before. A couple thrillers, a couple romance, 1 sci-fi, yeah, and crime, 1 autobiography. So a good mix there. I tend to read a mix of genres every month. And then my average star reading was 4.08, which is really good. I'm really happy. I actually found 3 5-star reads in March, 3 new favorites. You can see on this shelf here that I have a lot of blanks. I only keep books that I really loved. So the fact that these are all spaces or ones that I read this month and found their way onto the shelf says a lot. I did read 1 2-star book, but we'll get into that. So those are my stats. I hope you enjoy those. Really check out the Storygraph. I'm thinking of doing a video where I go through all the features of the Storygraph because I just think it's really great, and I love that more people are discovering it, but I don't know that everybody knows all the features on there. So now let's get to it. The first one that I read was a great way to start the month, and it was The Infinity Course by Kimi Dawn Bowman, and I had an e-arc of this one, thanks to Simon & Schuster Canada, I believe. And Kimi Dawn Bowman is an author I love. Her book, The Starfish, is on my favorite shelf. It's one of my favorite YA hard-hitting contemporaries, and I just adore Bowman's writing. And I thought this was intriguing because it's a sci-fi, which is not her usual genre. And I've talked about this many times on my channel. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it's worth repeating because I love this book so much, and it's the great start to a series. And the last quarter of it, I haven't been that surprised by a book in ages. It really caught me off guard. I don't want to say more than that because I think it's best to go into it not knowing, but this is a world where after you die, you go to this afterlife, and somebody like Alexa or Siri has taken over the afterlife. Her name's Ophelia, and she's treating humans how humans treated her in their world. So it's interesting because you understand the villain's motives here, and there's some great found family. I really like our main character, some great representation. I think some of the messaging in here was heavy-handed at times, but I really appreciated what Bowman was trying to do, and I think it's a great setup. The second book has the potential to be really, really amazing, and I cannot wait for it. I keep checking Goodreads to see if there's any information on it, but there's not. And then the second book was an ALC that I got thanks to Libro FM, and I think a lot of us probably read this one this month, and that is Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is the third book in the Brown Sister series, and my favorite. I really didn't think any book would top what's that one called? Take a Hint, Dani Brown. I didn't think anybody book could top that book because I love Dani Brown so much. I thought Dani and Zaf had great chemistry, and I still think they have the best chemistry of any of the characters in the series. But there's something about Eve that I've just personally related to. I think what's so great about the books is you'll see yourself in one of these sisters, and for me, I relate most to Eve, so I just thought that was interesting, and that is what kept me reading and falling in love with the book. And I really did love her love interest, Jacob. I thought there was great autism representation in here, some great conversations about how having autism is not a monolith, and I think that's an important messaging. And I just thought that there's some very steamy moments. This is the first time I listened to one of these books on audio, and there's something that happens, and it's hilarious, but it happens about midway through, and it just happens out of nowhere, and I think I was alone, so that was okay. But I was like, whoa, good thing nobody's hearing that, because it's steamy, but it's hilarious, great chemistry, just loved everything about it, and recommend the series. I know it's so hyped, but it deserves it. And then I read The Project by Courtney Summers, and this has been getting mixed reviews, and I get it. I understand why this wouldn't work for everybody. I think it's so hard when you have such a breakout hit like Sadie to write a follow-up. I cannot imagine the pressure of that. And the fact that this is a mystery thriller following sisters, it's hard not to compare them together, but they're so different. And I'm always intrigued by cult stories, but other than nonfiction, I haven't found one that I really, really loved, but I did enjoy The Project. I ended up giving it 4 stars, and I just thought it was an interesting conversations in here. If you know anything about the cult NXIVM, I've listened to some podcasts, I've watched a few documentaries. That's what this really reminds me of. And with that knowledge of that real cult, I think I can accept the things that happen in here. I understand how somebody at their lowest point gets manipulated into a cult like this one. You think that you're going to be enlightened, that this group, it's called the Unity Project, is going to save you. They give you shelter, they feed you, you're at your lowest point, you need help, and they're there to lift you up. So that's kind of what he does in here. And we're following 2 sisters, one who is a member of the Unity Project and the other who's trying to save her, but maybe gets wrapped in it, maybe doesn't. And it's just very tense. So I thought Courtney Summers set out to do something, and she accomplished it. So I actually really like this, and I'm curious to see what she's going to write next. And I enjoyed it. It's, again, hard not to compare it to Cemetery Boys, which is on my favorite shelf here, and was just brilliant. That is such a great book, deserves all the hype. And Lost in the Neverwoods is a Peter Pan retelling, but I think even on Goodreads, Aidan Thomas says that this is a fan fiction. And I would say it's more of a reimagining. It's inspired by Peter Pan, and he takes Peter Pan and Wendy and the Lost Boys and puts them in our real world. There's a mystery involved, which I thought was interesting, but some of the whimsy that I love about Peter Pan and Peter Pan retellings was lost in here because it's so dark, and they're not in Neverland, so I really thought that they would go to Neverland at some point, but that's not part of this book. And I don't know about the romance, wasn't my favorite, but I liked the mystery. It's a lot darker than I was anticipating. Aidan Thomas didn't shy away from just going there with this book, and I thought that was really brilliant. And the next one that I read was The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna, and I actually read this for a buddy read on Goodreads, which was interesting because there were mixed opinions on this one, which I was kind of surprised by, but when we had the discussion, I kind of understood it. but I ended up really liking this one. I gave it 4 stars. I think it's a great start to a series, and the film rights have already been purchased, so it's going to be adapted, and from what I hear, Namina Forna is writing the screenplay for it, which I think that she is a screenplay writer, and maybe that plays into it because there's not a lot of world building in here. I would curious more about the world and more about the politics. And I feel like we got some of the surface level stuff of that. There's so much potential for us to delve deeper in the sequels. I think she purposely left a lot of questions, a lot of things open in here. But what really stood out for me was the female empowerment. This is a very feminist story. There's some great moments in here, some really great quotes throughout this. I liked the magic system. I think it's really intriguing. I just think the found family in here is special. It's such a great setup. I think I'm somebody who tends to prefer first books in a series because I like the setup. I like learning. I like the beginnings. I love beginnings, and I know a lot of people often prefer the last books, but I'm all here for the setup. So I really, really like this one, and I'm curious to see when we will get the sequel and what the title will be in the cover, and to see where this is going, because there are a lot of unanswered questions in here. Next, I read Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers, and this really surprised me. There's some mixed reviews for here, and I think that is because of the marketing. This is being billed as a romance, and it's not. There's a romance in here. There's sweet love story in here, but that's not what's at the heart of this novel. This is a novel about Grace coming to age at 29 years old, finding out who she is, going through therapy, just some great conversations in here as well. Lots of the found family in here. I've been talking about found family. I read a lot of found family this month, which I love. But this is like the epitome of found family. They actually call each other brother and sister. It's just so, so sweet. And lots of great discussion about familiar pressures, having different expectations based on your race, because I think that is a big struggle for Grace in here, knowing that she'll be turned down for certain opportunities just because she's a woman of color. And she's been told in interviews that she doesn't fit their culture, and she knows what that means. So just a really special book and really beautifully written. I can't believe this is Morgan Rogers' debut, because the writing here is stellar. I have a blog and I shared some quotes in here, and those seem to be the ones that resonate with people most. But yes, great. I love the found family. I do really love the love interest, Yuki. I thought they had some slow build. They get married in Vegas as strangers, but they rush into living together and sorting through their marriage, but they kind of just go with the flow. But they do have interesting conversations. They do challenge each other. I loved how Yuki challenged Grace at one point in here. But yeah, it's a short little book, but great impact, beautiful writing. So I'm looking forward to more from Morgan Rogers. But the first one that I listened to for Bookoplathon is The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nevo, and this is one I have to reread because I listened to the audiobook and I thought it was beautiful. I loved it. I love the atmosphere, but I think a lot of it went over my head. I didn't know exactly what was going on. I think it's one that I think is better to be read physically, maybe while listening to the audiobook at the same time. So I'm going to do that, and maybe I'll talk about it again. And I also want to read the sequel. So that is one I have to reread, but I thought it was really beautifully written. And then after that, I read Punching the Air by Ibi Zoboi and Yusuf Salam. And this is a beautiful book. It's a hard-hitting contemporary written in verse, which is my favorite thing. And this is about, what is his name? I'm so bad with character names. This is about Amal, who is arrested for a crime he didn't commit. And he is an artist and a poet, and he uses his art and his words to unravel the truth and to cope with being in juvie. And it's just such a powerful book, the way that it's told. And Yusuf Salam is one of the exonerated 5, so you know how deeply personal this is. And if you like Jason Reynolds or Elizabeth Acevedo, if you like books written in verse, I think this is a must-read for you. So, highly recommend this one. I did see some buzz about it, but it's not talked about as much as it should be. And then sadly, we have my 2-star book, and I know that so many people love this and they can see why, but it just didn't work for me. And that is Echo North by Joanna Ruth Mayer. And I want to start off by saying I think that Mayer is a really talented writer. I would read more from her. I thought that this was beautifully written. I liked the atmosphere. I love the setup for this. And this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but it's also a retelling of, I have to look it up because I don't want to get this wrong. And there's some fables that I don't know. So I think if you have read these fables or are familiar with them, you might appreciate this more. But it's a retelling of East of the Sun, West of the Moon. And that is a Norwegian fairy tale. And it's also a retelling of Tamlin, which is a Scottish ballad. So I think maybe if you can catch on to those, or you might appreciate this more. And as much as I love Beauty and the Beast, I'd never seem to like the retellings. And I think that's because really at the heart, the relationship is problematic. And that I had similar feelings about that in this one. I didn't love the relationship. It got a little cheesy for me. But it did some interesting things. The idea of book mirrors was fascinating. There's some great twists in here, but overall, I didn't connect with the characters. I was actively rooting against there being a relationship, so I just think what I was supposed to love, I didn't like in here, which is unfortunate. But there is a companion novel, and I want to know more about that one, because if it's a prequel, that I would be interested in. The last physical book I read is probably my favorite book of the month, and it's no surprise. It's Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. I have all 4 of the books that she has out on my favorite shelf. This is the last one I had to read, and I was saving it. And I think if you ask me to rank her books, this one might be on top, because after I read it, I couldn't stop thinking about it. It really affected me emotionally, which doesn't happen often. Normally I can read a book that's deeply emotional and it'll put me in a dark place for a bit, but this one took me days to get over. And this follows Claudia, whose best friend Monday doesn't turn up to the first day of school, and obviously she's worried, but none of the adults in her life are worried. Monday's teachers aren't worried. Her mother doesn't seem too concerned about it, so she's really trying to get the adults in her life to find her best friend. And it's so frustrating and so devastating. And we flash back to the year before, years prior, before Monday was missing. And the timelines in here can be confusing. I was definitely confused about the timelines, but you just have to accept that Tiffany D. Jackson knows what she's doing because it all comes together. But this was just a haunting novel, powerful, devastating, everything that I expect from a Tiffany D. Jackson novel, but like on another level. This was incredible. And she actually just released the cover of her September release. It's called White Smoke, and it's a YA horror novel. I'm going to insert the cover here because I'm so excited about it and so thrilled that we're getting more from her. Now I have 2 more. Both were on audio. And both were from Libro FM, and both come out in April, so look forward to those. The first one is Broken in the Best Possible Way, and that's by Jenny Larson. I don't know if you can see it, but I have Furiously Happy by her on my shelves. I just love the way she talks about difficult subjects in such a relatable, hilarious way. She's got just great delivery, great sense of humor. I recommend her books on audio because she narrates them and she's so funny. And she has quite a few autoimmune disorders. She has rheumatoid arthritis, and she also has depression, so she does not shy away. This is what her books are about. She talks about these topics, and there's a chapter where she talks about, to her insurance company, that I thought was really moving. She talks about COVID in here, so just a great collection of essays from her. And the last book I read in April really surprised me. I thought I'd read this book to get over this one. I thought I'd just read a fun thriller that I wouldn't get attached to the characters at all. That's not what happened. I read The Good Sister by Sally Hepworth. I keep saying Hawthorne. It's Sally Hepworth. And she wrote Mother-in-Law. So if you've read that, let me know if it's worth reading. But The Good Sister, I was so attached to one of the sisters in here, Fern. And most of the story is from her perspective. But then we also have her sister Rose's diaries. But they're taking place at the same time. So whatever happens to Rose in her timeline, whatever happens to Fern, Rose then later talks about in her diary. So they're happening at the same time. And Fern has sensory issues, and it's quite clear that she has undiagnosed autism, and she meets somebody named Wally who is also on the spectrum, and they have a romance that's really sweet and great chemistry, and I just love how respectful and supportive they are of one another. And there are moments when I forgot that this was a thriller, and I didn't want this to be a thriller because I just wanted Fern to be happy. And as you get further in the story, you can feel the tension. You can feel where this is going. There's some predictability in here, but I don't think that matters. It was deeply uncomfortable. It was very, very stressful to read as somebody who really loved Fern, and I think a lot of readers will as well. And yeah, a lot happens in here, but it's a slow burn mystery, I would say. At its core, it's really a love story, which is surprising, and it's really like a slice of life. And Fern's a librarian. She loves books. I think a lot of people will like that too. So this was like such a surprise for me. One of the most surprising books I read in a long time. I did not expect to love this one as much as I ended up loving it. So that's The Good Sister. You have to get your hands on that when it comes out. It's one of the best thrillers I've ever read, and I am picky about my thrillers. Whew. So I've been talking a lot. I think I've been talking for half an hour at this point. So that is my March wrap up. This is one of my best reading months in a long time, I would say. 3 5 stars. Some that even got really close to 5 stars. A new favorite thriller. It's hard for me to fall in love with thrillers, so that's exciting. And yeah, what is the best book that you read in March? Because I'm always looking for recommendations. And thank you so much again for your time. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now.